Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today, we're going to talk about the issue of population, per se specifically the population paradox. Now, it took hundreds of thousands of years for the world population to grow to 1 billion, and then it grew 7 times in just another 200 years or so. Now, the global population reached the 7 billion mark in 2011 and is all set to cross 8 billion this year. This number is expected to grow to around 8.5 billion by 2030, 9.7 billion by 2050, and approximately 11 billion by 2100. Now, this dramatic growth has been driven largely by increasing numbers of people surviving to reproductive age, major changes in fertility rates, increasing urbanization, and accelerating migration as well. Around 61% of the global population lives in Asia, with China and India being the two most populous countries of the world. In fact, India is projected to overtake China by 2027 in terms of population numbers. Now, more than half of global population growth between now and 2050 is expected to occur in the African continent. However, the population of 55 countries in the world, with most of them in a European continent, are expected to decrease by 2050, of which 26 may even see a reduction of at least 10%. So what is contributing to the growth in world population? What are the major challenges here, and how can these challenges be tackled? For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. And let me first introduce them to you, beginning with, we have with us Dr. Aparajita Chattopadhyay, who's joining us. She's the professor with IIPS Mumbai. We also have with us Ms. Poonam Mutreja, Executive Director of the Population Foundation of India. And Dr. UV Somayazulu is also joining us. He's Director, Sigma Research, and former President of Indian Association for the Study of Population, that is IASP. Welcome, all of you, to Sansad Television. Let me begin with you, Ms. Mutreja, and let's first start by understanding these numbers a little bit, because they themselves tell a very interesting story, how in the past 200 years, the world population has grown at least 7-fold. And specifically, if you look at last 50 years, this has been a 3-fold increase. And this doesn't seem to be slowing down.
Well, I'd like to your numbers are great, and you've taken a lot of historical as well as future projections. But I'd like to say that the population numbers are increasing, you're right, but percentage is slowing down. Population will increase, especially in countries like India, because we have a large young population. So even if people have one child, the population will increase. But having said that, in terms of percentage terms, between 1950 and 2022, we have reached 1. The population growth today is 1 globally. And in India itself, from 2.2 in the last 30 years, we have come down dramatically. So the good news is that the numbers are, while the numbers will increase, and we knew that many years ago, we should have done a lot more for family planning, for women's empowerment, women's agency, women's education. But we are doing a lot today. India has shown huge success in the last decade in not only improving health outcomes for women, but also greater access to family planning services. For instance, in India, South in 24 states have reached replacement level. And it is the northern part of India, 6 states in northern parts of India, that are contributing more to the population growth, where the government, through its Mission Parivar Vikas, is focusing on the high fertility districts with all kinds of innovative programs. And after NFHS results, NFHS 5, which came out recently, the government has decided to expand it in many other districts and parts of India, including Northeast. So I'd like to say that the world, while the numbers have increased, the good news is that the population growth is slowing down across the world, and there are parts where it isn't slowing down, but there are countries that have done very well, not just India, Bangladesh, Indonesia. These are countries that have done huge investments. And thirdly, young people in India and rest of the world do not wish to have more than 2 children, and they are accessing, if public service is not available, they're accessing the private sector.
Okay.
So I'd like to say that we should look at the world, the future, and not only cry about the spilt milk of the past where we didn't make the effort that we should have. But in the recent years, there's been a lot of advancement in technology. There are 8 to 9 contraceptives available across the world, and India has only 6, but we need to increase, and we need to invest more in girls' education. There are tried and tested way of decreasing population.
Indeed. Of course, that's the very positive outlook of looking at all these numbers as well. So what you're saying, Ms. Mutreja, is that the population numbers might be increasing and might be projected to increase further as well, but the growth rate seemingly is well within the control there. Now, therein lies, within these numbers lies the paradox as well. I'd like to bring in, Dr. Chattopadhyay here as well. If you look at the global numbers, and as Ms. Mutreja is also referring to, there are certain, areas, certain countries where the projected growth is going to be a little on the higher side. But then there are countries where the growth rate is going to come down and come down drastically as well. Now, in region-wise, if you look at Africa, is going to be one of the areas where for the next 25, 30 odd years, the maximum growth in population numbers will be seen. On the other hand, in the European continent, and most of the countries will see a reduction of at least 10%. Dr. Chattopadhyay?
Okay, thank you. I completely agree with Dr. Poonam. But along with that, I will throw some light on the global perspective, as you have pointed out. I think by 2100, it would be around 2, total fertility rate. There are 2 major concerns in this respect. So first question is that whether we are having the enough carrying capacity to support 8 billion or maybe 11 billion by the end of this century. So my answer is both positive and negative in the sense. There are 20 studies till date which shows that the carrying capacity of the Earth in the given technology is around 8 billion, followed by good many studies that talks about carrying capacity of 16 billion. So we are not sure what is the carrying capacity of the Earth. Second point is that about absolute growth, there are 9 countries which will be contributing majorly for the future population growth. India is one. It is because of its huge base. And at the same time, many European countries will experience reduction in population in absolute numbers. But the crucial point that we are missing out here is the huge difference in consumption pattern. Right? So absolute number is one side. It is not the whole story. But the consumption pattern is very, very unequal. So 80% of the world population lives in countries having ecological deficits. That means they're using more resources than what they are regenerating.
Okay.
80% of the world's resources are consumed by 20% of the world population. So the consumption pattern is basically a hockey stick pattern. If you consider world population growth as 1, the other consumption, resource consumption, is 2 to 10 times higher than the population growth.
Okay.
And the current ecological footprint says that our current estimate is 2 Earth. That means we need 1 more Earth to support our current consumption pattern. And if we follow the consumption pattern of the USA, we need 5 more Earths. In this case, India is 0.8. So the problem lies with consumption pattern.
Okay.
Problem lies with the structural change of population. Problem lies with the job opportunities and creation of meaningful jobs for the growing population.
Okay. That's a very important and an interesting aspect there as well. And I'd like to bring in Ms. Mutreja also later. But let me first bring in, Dr. Somaya Zulu here. Dr. Somaya Zulu, in your views, how do you assess these numbers? On one side, there are absolute figures, and the projected figures as well. And of course, this is also true that the rate of growth is slowing down. The numbers, of course, will increase, but the rate of growth is slowing down. But then there are inherent challenges also with the increasing numbers.
Yeah, I agree with to my co-panelists Poonamji as well as Professor Aparajita, yes, the numbers are going up, but the percentage of change, the decline, we have some good news on that front, not only in India, in many countries. But, the problem is that the countries that are going to contribute towards higher growth of the population in the next 2 to 3 decades, if you look at to 2030 and beyond that 2050, you have, countries like Indonesia, countries like Nigeria, Uganda, and these are the countries that would be contributing more towards the growth of the population. And in these countries, they are developing countries. And being developing countries, as Dr. Aparajita also mentioned, the inequality issues are there, food security issue is there, food availability is an issue, and these countries also have very high level or moderate levels of malnutrition among the children and all. So there are other challenges as well. And one more fact we have to look at is that by 2050, we are expecting that, as Prajita said, we need 2 Earths. By 2050, with the kind of population we will have, the projections indicate that we will be needing 3 Earths. We have 1, we need 2 more Earths by 2050 if the current trend of the population growth continues. Yes, the population growth is declining. Even in India, some of the southern states and all have experienced below replacement fertility. But the bulk of the contribution is coming from the northern states of the country. And similar to this, added to this, you have the Global Footprint Network has brought out a report. They said that, we are using our resources at a faster pace. The pace can be considered as 2 times the pace at which the Earth is producing the renewable resources. It is 1:2. The Earth is providing 1 unit of resources, and we are consuming at the rate of 2 units. So it is 1:2. Already the imbalance has cropped in. So how to control that? How to manage that? How to address this? How to ensure that every individual has food security? It is related to the Sustainable Development Goals. Hunger-free society and poverty-free society. If we are trying to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, just 8 years are left out for this. We started in 2050. We have spent already 7 years, and by another next 8 years, we should be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. If we want to achieve these goals, then population dynamics has an important role in this. One has to understand the linkage between population dynamics and the Sustainable Development Goals, and formulate and implement effective strategies to address these, so that we will be there by 2030 at the Sustainable Development Agenda reaching stage. I think this is my viewpoint. And here the point to be noted is that consumption levels. One theory is there: the fertility comes down, the prosperity goes up, and the higher prosperity leads to higher consumption. Then it will again increase the imbalances and inequalities in the society. I think these are some of the concerns we need to pay attention.
Ms. Mukherjee, from the concept of population dynamics, and if you have to understand, all these concepts and then much more clearly understand the impact as well, as both the other panelists are pointing out, we would like to understand from you also these challenges which we face vis-a-vis inequality, food security as well, ensuring that the consumption pattern is also taken care of. Of course, the growth rate is going down, but then the absolute numbers are increasing. So therein, the challenge also increases because we have just one Earth.
Yes, so I'm very glad the panelists have raised the issue of consumption patterns. I think the amount of attention we give to population and the population scare and fear, the world doesn't give to consumption patterns. We need to do something drastically about consumption patterns of the rich in the developed countries and the rich in developing countries who may reach very high levels of consumption. That is one. Second, I do believe even the projections that we have, the projections can be brought down in terms of even numbers can be brought down if we invest in gender equality, we invest in education, we invest in more contraceptives. There is global evidence to show And in India, there is evidence if a girl is educated 12 years, just schooling, she is likely to have 2 or less than 2 children. And while a girl who's not educated is likely to have average 3 children. So we can invest at a faster rate in education. We can invest at a faster rate in postponing the first child, postponing age at marriage. That impacts fertility. And in fact, I am sure you're all aware, and in India, we know that the projections that were there, actually our fertility increase is lower than the projections that were made. They were revised. For instance,
Indeed.
we were supposed to overtake China in 22. It was revised. We were supposed to reach fertility levels of replacement level much later.
Much later.
So India has shown it. Other countries, like especially Africa, where they have a slow start. India was one of the first countries to have a family planning program, which is now almost 70 years old. The Africa got left behind because they did not invest in family planning, and there is impetus now, and I do hope that the world will invest more money in fertility decline, and at the same time, the world will deal with the issue of dealing with the carbon footprint, not only consumption patterns.
Indeed.
In fact, you know, the global economies that are doing very well have to invest their resources not only in dealing with consumption patterns and decreasing the global carbon footprint, but they have to also invest in science, technology to have more contraceptives, and especially male contraceptives. You know, one reason the world population increased is because the women who have the privilege of having babies also have the burden of family planning, but without any autonomy to make decisions. Very few women have the autonomy to make decisions on when they marry, when they have their first child, what will be the spacing. But introduction of contraceptives, every time there is a new contraceptive introduced, there is a benefit to society, because 6 to 12% increase in contraceptive prevalence happens.
Indeed.
Finally,
that is what the data has shown. Yes.
Finally, I would like to say that it is not just the developing countries, but also the developed countries that have to talk more about their consumption patterns. And food security. Food security is also decreasing and getting impacted because food production cost is becoming higher, and then the more meat we consume, the more output in terms of grains that are used for poultry, for animals to be reared and harvested for consumption. All those, we have to go through a paradigm shift in our thinking.
Definitely.
And I had hoped that post-COVID that will happen, because equality amongst people across the nation and the world in terms of food consumption, access to food, food pricing, all these have become global issues. It is no more something we can just the development.
Indeed. These are issues which are not bound by geographical, barriers out there. And that brings me again to Dr. Chattopadhyay. Dr. Chattopadhyay, do you agree to these aspects in terms of finding solutions? Because when we talk about consumption pattern, we also have to look at what does that pattern show in terms of what's happening in developed countries and developing countries, specifically the LDCs, least developing countries. Because when we're talking about projected population growth, there are some LDCs which are projected to grow exponentially in terms of absolute population numbers. So that is also important. The second is, as Ms. Mutreja was referring to, focusing on these social issues as well, women empowerment, education, more access to contraceptives.
Yeah, definitely Africa is a big challenge in this century in terms of population growth, and definitely we need to provide the basket of choice of contraceptions, more education, more work participation, and women empowerment. But having said so, yes, there are a number of other issues. I must mention it here. Number one is the environmental challenges, of which we have dilapidated water resources and air is too poor. Global food prices fluctuating, and one reason is soil depletion. And there is huge energy demand, and many of the developed countries who can shift from non-renewable to renewable, they are not showing a very good or healthy trend. So we need to invest hugely in case of energy shift, and developing nations need the support of the developed countries. Number two is that it is rectangularization of the survival curve, which is leading to increase in non-communicable diseases. And if you look at the latest report, it shows that cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, diabetes, and cancer, it occupies 80% of all premature non-communicable disease deaths. And it is a huge challenge for countries like India. And third is definitely we need to have fewer children. There are definite pockets in India where fertility is still relatively higher. We need to educate people. We need to empower girls. We need to give a lot of contraceptive choices. And we need to enhance our basic education about gender equality and family planning and fertility.
Okay. Dr. Somayazulu, quick concluding comments from you in terms of what needs to be done. You pointed out various aspects earlier, and of course, it looks like the developed nations will have to look at the consumption pattern, do a little bit more effort there, and the developing countries will have to focus more on the social aspects as Ms. Mutreja was referring to.
Yeah, I think, in 1974, there was a World Population Conference at Bucharest, and the slogan that was given there, the message was that development is the best contraception. It was in 1974. We are in 2022. So obviously, the social development in terms of education, empowerment of women, gender equality, and economic development is required. That would be the facilitating factor. That would lead to demographic transition in terms of higher use of contraception and low fertility levels and all. On the other hand, you also need policies and effective programs to address infant mortality and child mortality and under 5 mortality. Unfortunately, some of the states in India have very higher levels of infant, child, and under 5 mortality rate, coupled with higher levels of malnutrition. So we have initiatives like Poshan Abhiyan, Kuposhan Mukt Bharat, and all. We have several initiatives from the government, thanks to the government. Now we have to get the benefits from these various initiatives, and I think good that Sansad TV has started this debate. This kind of debate should happen at national level, state level, and subnational level, and even at the policy making level and program management level. These kind of decisions should take place.
Indeed.
And we need state specific and even district specific. We have NFHS provides the district level data. We could identify, I think we have initiatives, aspirational districts and all, we have initiatives. So at district level, we should have effective initiatives, and implementation of these initiatives is required. And there has to be, social and economic development coupled with women empowerment. Then that will lead to, better demographic indicators
Dividends.
in terms of reduced fertility and higher levels of contraception. Yes, coming to contraception, it has already, it has been a female-centered, for the female, for the woman, by the woman kind of approach is there. If you look at the method mix of family planning, bulk of it is only female sterilization. Unfortunately, we are not able to make much headway in terms of promoting these patient methods and all. But however, the sterilization is at very high level, and some of the states are lagging behind, and we have to ensure that those states also move forward in terms of getting the replacement level or below replacement level fertility. I think if collective efforts are required, there should be coordination between the central government and the state governments and the district level administration. There are several NGOs like what Population Foundation of India and several, organizations are striving towards this. I think collective and coordinated effort in this direction would be the game changer for according to me.
Indeed. There you're right, Dr. Somayazulu. Thank you so much. Ms. Mutreja as well for joining us, and Dr. Chattopadhyay for sharing your views and insight. As our experts were pointing out, Of course, it requires holistic efforts from all the stakeholders in terms of tackling the challenges of increasing population numbers and absolute numbers we're talking about. The projections, of course, show that the absolute numbers are set to rise exponentially, but then the growth rate itself is pretty much as on the expected lines. There is, though, a paradox here wherein certain parts of the world will increase in terms of, will see a rather, fast increase in terms of population growth, and others won't. The nations will have to adopt best practices from each other and focus more on the social issues, the developmental issues as well, to try and tackle all these challenges. We'll keep a close watch and come back again with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.